Welcome, everyone, to the Vinyl Monday mid-season special. I'm Abby, and Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, or in this case, a feature film length special, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. In the 4.5 years that I've been doing this week's album has been requested pretty consistently along the whole way, especially since I've covered this artist so comprehensively in the 4.5 years that I've been doing this, but I always avoided this album. This is just one of those records that's defined an artist, defined a moment, defined an entire decade. And I finally bit the bullet with this thing when I figured out what the season 5 finale is going to be. The mid-season special and the finale are always related. If there were ever a time to cover this record on this series, it would be now. This week's album is Joni Mitchell, Blue. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy of Blue is a repress from 1977, at least that's what Discogs says. I suspect it might be newer because of the Warner Brothers logo on the label. I bought my copy from the Newbury Comics off the highway in Westleb, New Hampshire. If you know, you know. It's like the weirdest spot for Newbury Comics. The summer between my sophomore and junior years of college. More on the halcyon days later. Now let's talk about this cover art, because the cover for Blue is something of an anomaly among Joni's albums at this time. It was photographed, for one, by Tim Considine. Yes, that Tim Considine. He was a photographer for a minute after he retired from acting, I guess. Who knew? Tim photographed Joni at one of her shows. You can see this hard contrast from the spotlight illuminating her famous bangs and her high cheekbones, as well as the microphone down here. Now, considering the covers of her last 3 albums, Song to a Seagull, Clouds, and Ladies of the Canyon, it's a surprise that the cover of Blue would be outsourced. Why did this happen? Basically, Reprise Records were sick of Joni twisting the prompt to fit her own artistic vision. But you gotta give it to her, she was being really clever about it. For the cover of Song to a Seagull, Reprise said it had to have Joni on it, so she put herself in this fisheye lens photo way up here. There's a bigger photo of her on the back, but still she's not very visible. It's mostly about her illustration. For Clouds, Reprise were a little more specific. Okay, Joni, the album has to have your face on it, so she painted her face. After the sparse line drawing on Ladies of the Canyon, Reprise were like, alright, Joni, either you put a photo of your face on your album or we'll have someone else do it. In comes Tim with the shot for Blue, and I think this worked in Joni's favor in some weird way. The hard grain reminds me of pointillism, using lots of tiny little dots to make up a painting, and the strong blue, of course, invokes Picasso's blue period. Opening up the gatefold, we have the lyrics. You cannot have a Joni Mitchell album without the lyrics printed somewhere. On Blue, we have, of course, Joni Mitchell, providing lead and backing vocals, guitar, piano, and dulcimer, and serving as principal songwriter. Backing her up are James Taylor on rhythm guitar and Russ Kunkel on drums. Our guests include Stephen Stills playing bass and some guitar, and Sneaky Pete on steel guitar. Blue was produced by Joni Mitchell with Henry Louis. Roll transition. Before we dive in, let's have a quick sources talk. I always list my works cited and further reading with each written review over on my website, but with the longer episodes, I like to do a roundup in the video since there's always so much going on. For print books, meaning books that I have physical copies of, I used Peter Dodgett's Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Will You Take Me As I Am, Joni Mitchell's Blue Period by Michelle Mercer. Traveling on the Path of Joni Mitchell by Ann Powers. This is a really good one. And Reckless Daughter by David Yaffe. I use the ebook version of Michael Walker's Laurel Canyon text. I cite several interviews from New York Magazine, Apple Music, Rolling Stone. One I happen to have a physical copy of. This is the May 1969 issue. I also used this interview book, Joni Mitchell, Both Sides Now, Conversations with Malcolm Aram. If I can find where it is, because it's actually important to what I'm talking about today. Oh, lovely. It fell under my bed. I didn't end up using Sheila Weller's Girls Like Us. None of these notes made the cut, but it's still a nice read. With that, let's get into this mess. It's uncertain when exactly Picasso's Blue Period began, but we know he was definitely in blue when he arrived in Paris in the fall of 1901, painting subjects inspired by his time in Spain that spring. His years in blue are commonly attributed to grieving his friend Carlos Casagemas, who took his own life in February. There's debate over when Joni Mitchell's Blue Period starts and ends as well. Most mainstream publications attribute it to just this album, maybe For the Roses too. Michelle Mercer says it's Blue, For the Roses, Court and Spark, and Hejira. For our intents and purposes, let's pull back to when Joni won a Grammy for her second LP, Clouds. Quote, "They were giving me awards, but they didn't know why. A lot of my art and the nuances of it were never recognized." Though she was respected by critics in her time, Joni was getting frustrated with her public image. She was the Disney princess of folk, or otherwise constantly compared to Joan Baez and Judy Collins. In the cover story of this May 1969 issue of Rolling Stone, quote, "Like Baez, Miss Mitchell," Rolling Stone calls the 25-year-old divorcee Miss several times, plays a fluid acoustic guitar. Like Collins, she can switch to the piano once in a while, and her compositions reflect the influences of Cohen. This story also describes Joni as a, quote, "wispy blonde," and a fresh, incredibly beautiful, innocent/experienced girl/woman who goes off on just the most adorable little candid tangents on stage. Cute. Just like people are weird about the Disney princesses at parks, people were weird about Joni Mitchell. Even Reprise Records' advertising department press releases titled "Joni Mitchell is 90% virgin," "Joni Mitchell takes forever," and "Joni Mitchell finally comes across," with captions like "Janice is dandy, Joni just feels better." Yeah, Joni thought this stuff was weird and gross. This stuff was weird and gross. She already told off Stan Corinne back in February of 1969, but he doubled down. Quote, "It was in no way my intent to embarrass you, but it is in my belief that the ad is an enormously effective one from the advertising standpoint, particularly since I wrote it myself." In a 2015 feature in New York Magazine, Joni said, quote, "Basically, at this time, I'm trying to fix my legacy. It's been butchered. It's been panned and scanned and colorized. People have always speculated about Joni's love life and who her songs are about. I'll make my own connections in this video, but I feel that's applied much too heavy-handed to her work. Critics simultaneously talking Joni up and reducing her to a childlike figure, and her advertising department of her record label being weirdly sexual about her. I believe this was the seed that planted Blue, not Joni's love life. It was her dissatisfaction with her public image. As far as the public was concerned, Joni was enjoying a year of domestic bliss with Graham Nash. They were the perfect Laurel Canyon couple. Graham wrote Our House about her place on Lookout Mountain. But by 1970, the relationship was on the rocks. Graham sailed off on a booze cruise with Joni's ex, David Crosby. I don't know what it is about that man, but Cros always seemed to be at the scene of the crime. Joni did not like that these two had run off together. She knew they would be drinking and drugging it up, and she was not about that lifestyle. But she still wants to be a good girlfriend and a good friend, so she joins up with the cruise in Jamaica. And that is where the relationship really went to There was this huge fight on the boat. It sucked, but she knew in her heart that her and Graham were through. Joni struggled to write since she got swept up in CSN and sometimes Wise stardom and being some kind of countercultural icon with them. She took a writer's retreat to Matala off the coast of Greece.
In Athens, we'd be walking down the street, the girl I was traveling with, and they would say to us, "Sheepy, sheepy, Matala, Matala," which I found out meant hippie, hippie, go to Matala, that's where the hippies are.
According to Michelle Mercer's text, Joni bought her dulcimer out there, but she'd been interested in the instrument since at least the 1969 Big Sur Folk Festival. She broke up with him in one of the most famous telegrams in all of rock and roll history. It read, "If you hold sand too tightly, it will run through your fingers." About the breakup, Joni said, quote, "I had sworn my heart to Graham in a way that I didn't think was possible for myself, and he wanted me to marry him. I'd agreed to it. And then I just started thinking my grandmother was a frustrated poet and musician. She kicked the kitchen door off the hinges on the farm. I thought about my paternal grandmother, who wept for the last time in her life at 14 behind some barn because she wanted a piano, and said, 'Dry your eyes, you silly girl. You'll never have a piano.' And I thought, maybe I'm the one that got the gene that has to make it happen for these two women. As much as I loved and cared for Graham, I just thought, I'm gonna end up like my grandmother, kicking the door off the hinges." This was the catch-22 of all of Joni's relationships, it seemed. She wanted domesticity, but she needed independence. Her first record was in part about this struggle, ultimately the want to be her own lady, won over the want to be someone else's old lady. Quote, "Graham was a sweetheart, but he needed a more traditional female. He loved me dearly, but he wanted a stay-at-home wife to raise his children. That was never gonna be Joni, no matter how much they both wanted it." Graham was heartbroken. Well, not too heartbroken. He moved right along with Rita Coolidge, but it still stung. "I was deeply in love with Joan, more than I would have admitted to her. I don't know why that is, but men are strange sometimes. When we parted, I went to San Francisco, bought the first house I saw, and moved in. It was hard." Breaking up when you share your whole friend group is hard to do. Joni lost her CSN community in the divorce, as she called it. To Disc magazine in January of 1970, she confessed her personal life was, quote, "in shambles." "And it's hard on me knowing I'm not giving anything to people I love. I'm a very solitary person, even in a room of people." She struggled to give to her audience, too. If you were to show up at a rock and roll concert dressed in gold lame and all of your audience was in Salvation Army discards, you would feel like a person apart. That's what it was. I began to feel too separate from my audience and from my times, separated by affluence and convenience from the pulse of my times. So Joni takes a hiatus from touring, from some time after her New England tour dates in late 1969 to early 1972. Instead, she loaded up on one-night-only appearances, TV show appearances, and festivals. One of these festival appearances was 1970 Isle of Wight. It did not go well. It all started when Elliot Roberts goofed and rented a Rolls Royce for Joni and Neil Young to travel in. The audience did not take kindly to this excess. These rich hippies aren't with the people. They're with the man. Man. This was several days into the festival with an antsy, hostile audience. There were serious concerns that this would become another Altamont. Joni was thrown to the wolves. Her peaceful, quiet guitar and piano just were not jiving with the agitated masses. Least of all was the quack who hopped on stage and started playing the bongos. Joni told bongo guy off, she told the audience off, and even though she looks like she's about to cry up there, she holds her own. She looks fragile up there and vulnerable, a little angry and sad, definitely overwhelmed. But she was proud of how she handled herself that day. "The first time I stood my ground was there, at Isle of Wight, in front of 500,000 people. She plays 3 new songs: My Old Man, A Case of You, and California. Depending on who you asked, I either saved the festival or was the victim of it. For all of the above reasons, pressure and sexism of the music industry, her breakup, feeling isolated from her friends, her audience, and her muse, Joni left the canyon. First she went to Matla, where she fell for a cook, Carrie Raditz. She wrote Carrie about him.
So we're telling this story when suddenly, boom, there's this huge explosion. He was the cook there. He lit the stove and it blew up. And that was how I met Carrie Raditz.
Then she went to Ibiza, where she bumped into Carl Ferris. Yes, the Carl Ferris that photographed these album covers. He took these photos of Joni. Then she left for Paris and beyond. Joni always wrote about the struggle between wanting the bustling city life and a quiet beach escape. The subtitles of the sides of her first record were I Came to the City and Out of the City and Down by the Seaside. Travel always inspired her work. Somewhere along the way, Joni met JT. Not that JT. The OG JT. James motherfucking Taylor. Like Joni, JT experienced a lot of heartbreak in a very short amount of time, very young. The flying machine split up. He was in treatment for 5 months, received electroshock therapy. A close friend of his, Suzanne, took her own life. He was dropped by Apple Records. All of this inspired his Fire and Rain. James would be hailed as, quote, the hottest composer-performer of 1971 and even the new rock messiah, one in a long line of them. But right now, Joni and James came together as a man and a woman down on their luck. And they learned a lot from each other. Both came from the folk music tradition, but they had their own unique interests. Joni liked jazz and would tune to a chord. James, having grown up in North Carolina, loved country and the blues. But this relationship was always on the high wire because James was clinically depressed and addicted to heroin. In this very fragile and tenuous state came Blue, recorded in January of 1971 at A&M Studio 3. Now, who were at Studios A and B? The Carpenters, recording their self-titled record, and Carole King recording Tapestry. This is like that 6-month period at Abbey Road where Sgt. Pepper's, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and Odyssey and Oracle were all recorded bang, bang, bang in a row. Crazy! Basically, James would be bopping back and forth between Studios B and C to help Carole and Joni. Some of her CSNY family came back after the divorce. Steve Stills was ever loyal to her, and it's a good thing he did because Joni really needed people to rally around her. She described years of bottled up emotions leaking out. I'd just look at a person and I'd know too much about them that I didn't want to know. And because everything was becoming transparent, I felt I must be transparent. And I cried. She started having nightmares about being in an auditorium wearing a clear plastic bag and all of her organs were on her outsides. That's how I felt. Like my guts were on the outside. I wrote Blue in that condition. No one could come in besides Steve, Sneaky Pete, Russ, and James, or else she'd just fall apart. And then it would be this whole big thing because, oh my god, I just made Joni Mitchell cry. That's gotta feel like accidentally stepping on a butterfly, dude. I'd feel like pure shit. Joni's relationship with her collaborator didn't last. James was still struggling with his addiction, and according to Joni's website, he was the one who called it off. In March, at the singular last possible second, Joni recalled the masters, swapping out what seems like the upteenth recording of Urge for Going in her career so far for the opener and closer of the record, All I Want and The Last Time I Saw Richard. Now, for those of you keeping track at home, this is the 3rd time Urge for Going was cut from a Joni record. I love the song, but Blue just was not the album. If she was going to put her own recording of the song on one of her records, it would have been her first. After making this cut, the album was complete. The track listing of Blue goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have All I Want, followed by My Old Man, then Little Green, Next, Carrie, and side 1 closes with the title track, Blue. Opening up side 2, we have California, followed by This Flight Tonight. Then River, next A Case of You, and the album closes with The Last Time I Saw Richard. Blue was released on June 22nd, 1971, with promotional singles Carrie, backed with This Flight Tonight, and California, backed with A Case of You. Now, I've always considered this album to be part of an unofficial set, because Graham Nash wrote his own masterpiece about his breakup with Joni, Songs for Beginners. But that's a story for another day. Now, I'm going to state this for the record. I plan out my Vinyl Monday seasons months in advance. I will sit down and I will plan blocks of episodes. Stating for the record, I had Plastic Ono Band and Blue back to back months before Matt Williamson posted his own video about Plastic Ono Band and Blue. My upload schedule and the albums that I feature accidentally overlapping with my peers happens once in a blue moon. But the best part is when I get to respond to them. Matt Williamson said that the only contemporary review he could find of Blue was by Timothy Krause for Rolling Stone. Matt, I raise you the Melody Maker review. Unfortunately, this is one of those issues of the Melody Maker that is not on the World Radio History Archive yet, so I can't actually cross-reference to find this author's full name. Save for the busted search function. Devs, please fix that. Joni's archive on her official website is otherwise fabulous, and they've reprinted this review with the author's initials AL. AL takes a very personal angle with their review. They say Joni's music has profoundly affected them and is a part of their daily routine, admitting they have pored over Blue for 5 days straight. Haven't we all? They recognize the conversation surrounding Joni and other songwriters of her caliber. The author name checks Neil Young and JT is shifting. Might it be that the Laurel Canyonites are suffering from rockstaritis? Quote, the songs here reflect the hang-ups of such an existence, and, for me at least, it's hard to relate to them. The lyrics are, quote, less satisfying than Joni's previous efforts, but the music is her strongest to date. Each song seems not to have been worked out, but to have been born whole and perfect and complete, with shining guitar and velvety piano. The songs are concerned with the men and the places, or both. In her restless life, and several express an underlying theme, a love-hate relationship with the rock milieu. I also raise you the New York Times review in which Don Heckman suspected this will be the most disliked of Mitchell's recordings, despite the fact that it attempts more and makes greater demands on her talent than any of the others. And there's Ellen Willis's piece for The New Yorker from 1973, though I don't know how closely to the Blue release date you would count as being contemporary. We'll get more into the Rolling Stone review later, but we'll slot its conclusion in here because it's a good segue. In portraying herself so starkly, she has risked the ridiculous to achieve the sublime. The results, though, are seldom ridiculous. On Blue, she has matched her popular music skills with the purity and honesty of what was once called folk music, and through the blend, she has given us some of the most beautiful moments in recent popular music. In this closing paragraph, Krause lists the most repeated reasons why so many publications hail Blue as one of the greatest albums of all time. Pitchfork, The New York Times, Mojo, Time Magazine, Uncut, Chris Gow's Guide, you name it. This is one of the most consistently critically lauded albums of all time. This album is somewhere on their list for the songwriting, the inventive arrangements, and the metamorphosis of folk sounds and writing into pop without it being pop. Speaking of Rolling Stone, they royally pissed off Joni. Rolling Stone played right into this speculation and the idea that Joni dated too much. The February 1971 issue named Joni Old Lady of the Year for her friendships with Crosby, Stills and Nash, James Taylor, etc., etc. Who was Old Man of the Year? Charles Manson, for his friendships with Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, etc., etc. Joni was rightfully pissed. Jerry Hopkins and, quote, some other staffers, who I imagine would like to remain nameless now, further crossed the line in a 1972 issue, making a graphic titled Hollywood's Hot 100, their Charlie Kelly conspiracy board connecting all of Laurel Canyon. Joni's name had smudged lipstick kiss connected to Cross, Nash, and JT. Nash's other ex, Rita Coolidge, was also on the spread, but Joni was uniquely sexualized and singled out, as put by Ann Powers. This chart illustrates how sexism was embedded in Rolling Stone's definition of irreverence. Women got a ribbing for their sexual exploits, but were only considered worth including if they'd made a match that impressed. Otherwise, they were relegated to the corners. Sure, Joan Baez and Janis Joplin no doubt got it worse from Rolling Stone, the former for being preachy, and the latter was branded a slut. Linda Ronstadt had really weird comments made about her too, but for a woman who was, for all intents and purposes, in crisis, this was too much for Joni. Quote, "My individual psychological descent coincided with my ascent into the public eye. They put me on a pedestal, and I was wobbling. I was going down. And with that came a tremendous sense of knowing nothing. Western psychology might call it a nervous breakdown, but in certain cultures, they call it a shamanic conversion. I read nearly every psychological book I could lay my hands on and threw them all against the wall. Depression could be the sand that makes the pearl. Most of my best work came out of it. If you get rid of the demons and disturbing things, then the angels fly off too. But living like this wasn't sustainable." At 27 years old, Joni left the canyon. She had to learn the hard way that the angels won't fly off if you cure your sadness. She built a house without electricity and started what I believe to be Blue Part 2, For the Roses. Blue's profile steadily grew over the decades. The record wasn't very popular out of the chute, Joni said. Out of the chute is such a Joniism. It was over time that it was discovered. People wore out copies and replaced them and passed them on as gifts, and so the numbers ended up getting pretty big. A new wave of fans came with the New York Times' 2000 feature Critics' Choices Albums as Mileposts in a Musical Century. Blue was one of only 3 albums made by women chose to represent the entire 20th century in music. That same year, Cameron Crowe included Blue in his famous album scene of Almost Famous, and included River in the film's soundtrack. 9 years later, Joni said it was, quote, frustrating that everything was compared unfavorably to Blue. They wanted me to stay in that tortured way. I peeled myself down to the bone. There was no place left to go. I had to start building up and healing myself and looking outward. This album influenced the likes of Bob Dylan, who used the color red as a motif throughout his Blood on the Tracks, including the song Tangled Up in Blue. Brandi Carlile sang the whole Blue album through in a special concert, and in his 2010 Hollywood Reporter review of Taylor Swift's 3rd album, Speak Now, Chris Willman likens her diaristic songwriting to Joni's on Blue. Now, I can't confirm anything because Taylor has historically been so tight-lipped about her influences, but it seems that Joni and Blue struck a chord with her. So much so that she cut her hair like Joni's and released her own color-themed breakup album. This is Taylor's version, but look, she even imitates Joni on the original cover. Alas, there was not a happy ending to the Tay-mother-Joni-daughter relationship back when Taylor was trying for an acting career, which I don't know why she did because she's not a very good actress. A film adaptation of this book, Girls Like Us, was in the works. Taylor was eyeing the role of Joni, but it was nixed with the swift put-down heard around the world. I've seen her. Physically, she looks similarly small-hipped and high cheekbones. I see why they cast her. I don't know what her music sounds like, but I do know this, that if she's going to sing and play me, good luck. Pause. Let's set the record straight. Joni first voiced this sentiment in a Rolling Stone interview a couple months before. There, she was clear that her problem wasn't with Taylor, it was with the film itself. I said to the producer, all you've got is a girl with high cheekbones. It's just a lot of gossip. You don't have the great scenes. Blue has been consistently represented on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list and several other publications' equivalents. River has been covered over 500 times. A Case of You, even more. Amanda Seyfried sang California on Jimmy Fallon's show.
Sitting in a park in Paris, France, reading the news and it sure looks bad. They won't get cheese.
And 50 years after its release, Blue hit #1. Dan Bihar said it best. It's so etched in stone that he wouldn't know how to draw from it. I'm not totally sure either. So, what do I think of Blue? Did Plastic Ono Band and Blue really kick off the confessional singer-songwriter thing, as Matt Williamson said they did in his recent video? Joni Mitchell had been writing this way since at least Clouds. Both Skip Spence and Syd Barrett released raw, revealing albums in 1969 and 1970 respectively, although their songwriting styles are much more opaque. Besides, as Joni explained, there's only two kinds of confession I know: voluntary and under duress. And I am not confessing. Like she sings on the record, she's sad and she's sorry, but she's not ashamed. One could say Joni started the trend of being a diaristic singer-songwriter, but she's not diaristic like Taylor Swift is. The problem with being a diaristic writer, as A.L. explained in The Melody Maker, is one of empathy. Joni's songs are autobiographical, and one's reaction to them depends to a large extent on how far one can relate to the experiences she describes. Taylor Swift's best songs are about being Taylor Swift. Joni Mitchell's best songs are not strictly about being Joni Mitchell. Blue is overrated is a lukewarm to refrigerator cold take at this point. We know her albums to follow are more interesting musically, and we know she'd always been writing with this lyrical depth. You have to consider the balance Joni struck here. Compelling music, raw writing. Consider the settings of Blue. Lonely Road, River, Post-Breakup Escape, Dark Cafe. The magic of Joni's best music is that she could spin intensely personal experiences, with lyrics teetering on oversharing, into universal songs. The people who get the most out of my music see themselves in it. The music, though, is so unique to Joni. I'm guilty of using the term weird chords to describe her tune-to-chord style. Quote, how can there be weird chords? Chords are depictions of emotions. By twisting the knobs on the guitar until I could get these chords, I heard inside that suited me. They feel like my feelings. I called them chords of inquiry. They have a question mark in them. There were so many unresolved things in me that those chords suited me. Joni's voice on Blue is at a tipping point. She was a heavy smoker. Everyone back then was. She had her first cigarette at age 9. But what so many critics miss when they talk about the change in Joni's voice is that women hit a second puberty in their 20s. Our hormones change, ergo our voices change. It's why I don't sound the same in my earlier videos. Well, that and for the first 10 episodes of Vinyl Monday, I was zooted beyond this mortal plane on camera, but that's neither here nor there. Even if you go back to 2023, I do not sound the same. My voice changed, my hormones changed. Around here and For the Roses, we start to hear smoking and aging change Joni's voice. She can't hit the high notes that she used to in the song To a Seagull Days. But what about the backing vocals on Court and Spark? She could layer them, 5 times to give the illusion of the full-bodied soprano voice. When you pay attention to her lead vocal, Joni uses more falsetto than head voice on Blue because it's getting harder for her to access her head voice. When she does, there's more air in the notes. She'd been flirting with jazz since Ladies of the Canyon, but her changing voice got her to lean into it and switch up the arrangements of her old material. Blue came into my life when I was so happy. It was the last no strings attached, truly happy time in my life, the summer after the worst heartbreak of my life and the summer before my parents' divorce. We dropped my sister off at college for the very first time. That road trip was our last family trip together, actually. It coincided with the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. Being a rock and roll newbie, I of course was listening to the entire Woodstock festival as it happened. I slept through Sly and the Family Stone, but that's neither here nor there. These were green times. This was Led Zeppelin, Bob Dylan and Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplane. This was the time when the almost famous soundtrack was the freaking Bible, okay? And I was so tender, having just lost my first love. I had never heard anyone sing like Joni. Just wait till you hear Linda Perhacs, kid. And I'd never heard the dulcimer. I listened to Blue constantly on this trip. That was my cellophane time. Bob Dylan was like my freaking Superman. He was like the first songwriter to speak to my mind and the way that I thought. Joni Mitchell was the first songwriter to speak to my heart. She was like Wonder Woman with the lasso of truth. I thought I was the only woman in the world in her early 20s who had ever discovered Blue this way. Yeah, me and a few million others. But that's just how you are when you're 20. You think you're the first person to have discovered anything. I was broken up with for being too much. Can you imagine that? Every woman's been broken up with for that reason at least once, regardless of if they were actually as much of a handful as I am. That's what Blue is about. Being too much, or at least being made to feel like you are. Instead of summarizing the Rolling Stone review like I typically would in the previous chapter of this video, I'm doing it here. It's not often that I find a review with points so remarkably off base I can dissect them in a review of mine. For example, Timothy Krause was dead wrong when he said Blue was Joni's name for the muse of this album. That is true for the title track, but I'm about to show you how Blue is the palette that Joni paints in over these 10 songs. Here's something facepalm worthy. These songs have little or nothing to do with the main theme of the album, developed in the remaining songs, which is the chronicle of Joni, a freelance romantic searching for a permanent love. She announces this theme in the first line of the first cut, All I Want. I am on a lonely road and I am traveling, looking for something to set me free. She's looking to settle down, he says. Good grief, Timmy, it's right there! She's looking for an escape, not love! I see how this can be confusing. She previously wrote about wanting to settle down with Graham and him not being sure. She makes grand proclamations on All I Want, wanting to talk to, shampoo, renew her lover, knit him a sweater, write him a love letter. I want to make you feel better. I want to make you feel free. But people change their minds. Especially when the guy goes off on a booze cruise with her ex. All I Want is Joni's autopsy of an emotionally exhausting relationship. Though I hate you some, I hate you some, I love you some. Oh, I love you when I forget about me. Ladies, has this ever happened to you? When I think of your kisses, my mind seesaws up and down, up and down. Do I stay or do I go? The highs are high, which makes you want to stay, but the lows are low. Do you see how you hurt me, baby? So I hurt you too, and then we both get so blue. The first appearance of the word blue on Blue. Joni is cautiously optimistic and happy to be off the roller coaster for now. Looking for something, what can it be? She's curious. Her tone is revelatory, the melody is bouncy, her dulcimer playing is percussive, her cadence is fabulously rhythmic, especially when she references canon in D.
Do you want to dance?
Joni switches to her other main instrument, the piano, for My Old Man. Old man as in old school slang for the guy you're going steady with, which in and of itself is a pretty old school way of phrasing it. Like our house did, my old man describes a slice of domestic bliss inside the free love generation. We don't need no piece of paper from the city hall keeping us tried and true. The institution of marriage is so square, man. We have love, and that means something. You know, let's go braid each other's hair or something. He's a free spirit, walking in the rain, dancing in the dark, singing in the park for his supper. Like her. He reminds her of all her favorite things: a warm cord, a sunshine in the morning, fireworks at the end of the day. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Listen to how she changes to the minor key when describing how lonely she is when he goes away. Everything gets colder. All the other colors are sucked out of the scene. Her world just feels wrong without him. The bed's too big, the frying pan's too wide. Then when he comes back and Joni sings the chorus again, the warmth and color comes back into the arrangement. My Old Man is a fabulous example of how Joni would use the melody and the playing in service of the lyric. Picasso didn't just paint in blue, he also painted in green. Like Mother on Plastic Ono Band exposed John Lennon's core wound, the one motivation behind the things that he did and the people that he sought out and how angry he was. The core sorrow that made him an artist, one could say. Little Green exposes Joni's core sorrow. But people didn't know this was an autobiographical song. Not for about 20 years, when some schmuck sold their story to the tabloids. Born with the moon in Cancer, Joni's rising sign. Choose her a name she will answer to. Call her green so the winters cannot fade her. Call her green for the children who've made her. Joni had a boyfriend in college. They consummated the relationship. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Right out of the chute, as she phrased it. It was her first time. She said her sex ed in school wasn't great. Back then, in 1964, your only options as an unwed mother were to get married or go to a home for unwed mothers. Joni tried to get into a home, but they were full. Abortion was out of the question. Joni had been a tomboy all her life, and this was the first time ever that she wasn't one of the boys. It was the first time that she saw the double standard between men and women, even in the 60s free love counterculture. Free love. Now we know there's no such thing. Pay later, always. He went to California, hearing everything's warmer there. Of course he left. Joni gave birth in February of 1965 when she was 21 years old. She was alone and far from home. Her parents had no idea about any of this. She tried her best to provide for them both, but the realities of life set in. Child with a child pretending, weary of lies you are sending home. She was an unmarried art student with no marketable job skills, singing in folk clubs for a living, living in an attic apartment in the winter in Canada. I was dirt poor, Joni said. An unhappy mother does not raise a happy child. It was difficult parting with the child, but I had to let her go. Joni put her daughter in foster care first. Then she met Chuck Mitchell. He promised to get her better work, and she knew if she had the money, then she could bring her daughter home. Only when they were already married did Chuck finally come clean and say he wouldn't raise another man's child. Realizing she could not give her daughter the life she deserved, she finally gave her up for adoption. So you sign all the papers in the family name, you're sad and you're sorry, but you're not ashamed. Little Green, have a happy ending. As soon as the Chuck and Joni duo broke up, they divorced, as being a family was the reason Joni married him in the first place. Joni did not give up that baby to advance her own career. She gave her up because she couldn't give her the life she deserved, so she gave her a happy ending instead. It was a completely selfless act, and if you ask me, that's the love of a mother. She still thinks of her all the time, every spring, when she sees the new plant growth. Just a little green, like the color when the spring is born. There'll be crocuses to bring to school tomorrow. It's worth noting that Joni's daughter's birth name was Kelly, like Kelly Green. Mother and daughter did find each other again in the 90s. Joni has called it a beautiful relationship. She's close with her grandkids too. They all got a happy ending. Oh, you blew through that box of tissues? That's okay. Carrie! Joni's retreat to Matala makes me think of Leonard Cohen's residence on Hydra and the popularization of the hippie trail in the late 60s. In wake of RFK's assassination, Life magazine said, "Is this the new phenomenon? Running away from America and running away from emotion?" Yes, all these kids wanted to escape the cultural craziness that surrounded them. That's why hitchhiking across the country and communal living was a thing in the 60s. Joni arrived on Matala in pleated pants from her music industry world of clean white linen and fancy French cologne. She escapes to the land of beach tar and dirty fingernails. That's where she met Carrie. The song has a bouncy, rhythmic calypso arrangement. I feel their carefree hot days and warm summer nights out on the town. It's a summer fling. It's flirty. It's fun. Ironic, as she's breaking up with Carrie in the first verse. You know, it sure is hard to leave here, Carrie, but it's really not my home. Listen to how Joni's harmonies hug each other close, like fragrant jasmine flowers. She even becomes the wind from Africa. Sure is hard to leave. But once she's done with her swanky living and fresh-cut flowers, she wants to come back to Matala. You always want what you can't have. We're in the deepest, darkest blue at the center of Joni's composition, the side one closer and title track. This one has been attributed to JT's heroin addiction, but it's bigger than that. Blue is Joni's most demanding vocal performance on the record. The melody rises and falls like waves, not little ones at the beach, big ones at sea. I don't think this water connection is too far off. Joni is a Scorpio sun, Pisces moon, Cancer rising, a grand trine in 3 personal placements, all in water signs. Joni likens herself and her lover to sailors on the rough, black waters of rock and roll, and the songs are their tattoos. Rock and roll came from the blues and soul and was marketed as kid stuff. Then came happy, hippie, peace, and love, somewhere after LSD was criminalized in 1966 and heroin and cocaine arrived on the scene. It slipped into acid, booze and ass, needles, guns, and grass. Joni strikes the piano with each chord, leaving the last chord to ring out after her bruised voice sighs. Lots of laughs. She trails off, as if lost in a memory. Then her piano rolls and tumbles, bashing the bow again. Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin all died within 18 months of each other. Just a couple weeks after Blue's release, Jim Morrison passed away. There's so many sinking. Now you've got to keep thinking you can make it through these waves. A whole generation was lost at sea, it seemed. Everybody's saying that hell's the hippest way to go out, but I don't think so. But I'm gonna take a look around, though. Joni has returned from oblivion with a prize for her lover to remember her by as he embarks on his own voyage. Here's a shell for you. Inside you'll hear a sigh, a foggy lullaby. She sends her voice up for a fabulous sustain on There Is Your Song From Me, and the piano crests and breaks on the rocks. A final desolate chord gets a little extra space to hang on in your mind as you get up to flip the record over. Opening side 2, The Sun After the Storm, is the bright, infectious, sunny California, with cheery dulcimer and Joni's chirping voice. It's a happy arrangement and melody for sad lyrics. This is a song in mourning. Post-Manson family, Laurel Canyon was no longer the place to escape to. Neither was Haight-Ashbury or Woodstock. Michael Walker said, the canyon began to morph into an altogether harder and more cynical place. All the rich hippies ladies moved off to Bel Air, right? Joni was one of the first to do it. The political violence of 1968, the violence of 1969, seeing the war and the bloody changes on TV constantly, of course kids wanted to escape. Whether it was draft dodging, drugs, or the hippie trail. Reading the news and it sure looks bad. They won't give peace a chance. It was just a dream some of us had. It's painful to realize the dream is over. Joni herself connected Blue to the cultural disillusionment of the 70s. It's me moving through the backdrop of our changing times. I was in Matala and we got beach tar on our feet, and then I went to Ibiza and I went to a party down a red dirt road, then I went to Paris, where Picasso started painting in blue, where it was too old and cold and everything was done. But it's also more than a diary. It's one chapter in the great American novel of my work. California is the travel diary song on Blue. It's Joni bopping around, trying to find her place in all this. She loses a few things along the way, including her camera. The Red Rogue cooked good omelettes and stews, and I might have stayed on with him, but my heart cried out for you, California. Fittingly, all of Joni's California friends play on the track. Steve Stills on bass, Russ Kunkel playing the drums with brushes, JT on guitar, and you can't have a 1970s Laurel Canyon album without some steel guitar. You can find yourself on your travels, but you can't outrun your sorrows. Oh, it gets so lonely when you're walking and the streets are full of strangers. All the news from home you read just gives you the blues. Sneaky Pete colored the arrangement with wistful steel guitar there. On the side 1 opener, Joni asks what it could be that she's looking for. On the side 2 opener, she's pinned down that question. Will you take me as I am, strung out on another man? This relationship is doomed to fall apart if her heart isn't in it, but she doesn't care. She just wants to feel loved. Isn't that what we all want? I don't know what happened here, but the production on this flight tonight went to hell. I thought we learned this lesson with Song to a Seagull. I'm not talking about the compressed vocal and guitar mimicking the radio. I actually think it's one of the standout moments for production on this album. It's so much fun. I'm talking about Joni's mic peaking on her Starlight Starbright high notes. Starbright, Starbright, you got the love. This flight tonight has my favorite guitar part on the record. The chords are evocative, dark and anxious and unsure of themselves, but animated. Like getting a little champagne drunk on your first night flight alone, but then you realize, hey, I kind of regret leaving that guy behind. I was slow to appreciate River. I still think the Jingle Bells interpolation to be a little gauche. I'm definitely in the minority on that, but I have to admit, this song does hit during the Christmas season when you just want to be anywhere but where you are right now. Joni's unhappiness is with her public image, with her fame. It don't snow here, in fact it stays pretty green. I'm gonna make a lot of money, and then I'm gonna quit this crazy scene. Rock and roll is a crazy scene, whether you're the rock star, the groupie, or the lady writer caught somewhere in the middle. It's so hard to keep a hold on your core sense of self when you're surrounded by so many people with personas and fake names and ulterior motives. That's what Joni's writing about on Blue. Her core sense of self is kind of slipping away. She's slipping back to thinking of her childhood in Canada, just skating on the river. She's bargaining for her freedom to return to Roberta Joan instead of being Joni Mitchell. Joni's guy once made her California blues go away. He tried hard to help me, he put me at ease. I do love the conversational tone in this verse. It's like she's writing in her diary or talking to us, her friend on the phone. Then comes the cringeworthy, he loved me so naughty, made me weak in the knees. The Sunset Pig line is a clunker too. But he can't make her blues go away. River is the one truly confessional spot on Blue. She admits, I'm so hard to handle, I'm selfish, and I'm sad. Her phrases are turned down, as if she turns down the bedding for herself on this unseasonably warm night. And now I've gone and lost the best baby that I ever had. I'm difficult to love, I have commitment issues, and it cost me a great relationship. Damn, just damn. Why am I so sad? Do I have the right to be sad at this point with all this money and living in a place where it's summer all the time? I shouldn't feel sad, but I do. It's like you have everything in the world and you're still not happy. Joni takes accountability for her running away and this relationship falling apart. Her and her stupid lingering sadness made her baby say goodbye. She was too much. If I recall correctly, A Case of You was the song that got me to listen to Blue and was my first real impression of Joni. This set of lyrics are one hell of a first impression. They are among Joni's best. Just before our love got lost, you said, I am as constant as a northern star. And I said, constantly in the darkness? Where's that at? If you want me, I'll be in the bar. The scene melts into her at the bar alone, perhaps in the same seat that her and her lover once sat in, as she draws their home country and him on a coaster. For the longest time, I thought, how could one guitar sound so otherworldly and different? It was a dulcimer, but I forgive my younger self, the guitar and dulcimer mesh together so well on this song. I am a lonely painter, I live in my box of paints, I'm frightened by the devil, and I'm drawn to those ones who ain't afraid. Her paint are her songs. She lives in reconstructing these scenes, sort of crystallizing this experience for a universal song, what she's so good at. She's consumed by her writing and why she does it, a core wound. She knows she's drawn to those not afraid of the devil, those who can stare into their own darkness and look away unchanged, and through the course of A Case of You, she discovers that that's because of this heartbreak. Everyone has that one heartbreak that screws them up a little bit forever. Arctic Monkeys wrote a wonderful song about this, running all over town in search of your lost love, called Cornerstone. I know I have my cornerstone. I remember that time you told me, you said love is touching souls. Surely you've touched mine, 'cause part of you pours out of me in these lines from time to time. When you love someone, you pick up little bits and pieces of who they are and things they do, for better or for worse. It seems that Leonard Cohen was Joni's cornerstone, the one she searched for in everyone. He introduced her to the I Ching and the works of Lorca and Camus, and she said he was profoundly influential on her songwriting. I met a woman, she had a mouth like yours. She knew your devils and your demons, and she said, go to him. Stay with him if you can, but be prepared to bleed. Joni never confirms who her songs are about, so this is a big deal. But she said that this verse was about Leonard taking her home to meet the folks. And his mother warned Joni, you can be with my son, but he's gonna break your heart. I didn't have quite this experience, but I remember distinctly when I was at my ex's mom's house and she held me and she told me, you're so pretty. It was just like that. You're so pretty. Right then and there, I knew the relationship was on borrowed time, and wouldn't you know it, he broke up with me a month and a half later. And then I heard Blue for the first time. Joni told Cameron Crowe for Rolling Stone, the Blue album, there's hardly a dishonest note in the vocals. At that period of my life, I had no personal defenses. I felt like a cellophane wrapper on a pack of cigarettes. I felt I had absolutely no secrets from the world, and I couldn't pretend in my life to be strong or to be happy, but the advantage of it in the music was that there were no defenses there either. This quote has been repeated over and over again in accounts of Blue. I even quoted it in a past episode. Joni's repeated it herself. But I want to go back to the matter of Taylor. The Swiftologist identified that something inside Taylor died with Red and died again with the Tortured Poets Department. Two of Taylor's longest and most personal records, her cellophane albums, that laid the diaristic songwriter in her to rest. She replaced this with pop writing, one effort clearly superior to the other that wasn't quite so personal. Instead of going full force radio pop like Taylor did, Blue triggered Joni's transition to sophistopop. And jazz, not quite so personal. I want to blow this damn candle out. I don't want nobody coming over to my table. I don't want to talk to anybody. Something inside Joni Mitchell died with Blue. This brings us to the final track on Blue, one that I have grown to adore in recent months. The Last Time I Saw Richard. Several sources say Joni's ex-husband Chuck was the muse of this song. Again, it's not that simple. It's a little bit of Chuck. The last time they saw each other was, in fact, in Detroit. It's a little bit of Leonard. And it's also about another folk singer she met in New York, Patrick Skye. Patrick was the one who called Joni a hopeless romantic and who married a figure skater. You laugh, you think you're immune. Go look at your eyes, they're full of moons. You like roses and kisses and pretty men to tell you all those pretty lies. This recalls her pre-Blue lyrics. Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles everywhere. The painted ponies go round and round. Around clouds, we start to hear that loss of innocence. Now, 3 years later, the narrator has seen both sides of love, and she stews in the same bitterness Richard did back in '68. While he's living comfy with a dishwasher and a coffee percolator and a TV, he's empty inside. He sits up all night with the lights on. She's cynical and drunk in some cafe. Only a dark cocoon before I get my gorgeous wings and fly away. The desperation with which this line is sung, she sounds so fragile. Like glass, she could shatter at any moment. She teeters on the pedestal that she's been put on. Though the music is so utterly bereft and the final chord of the record so unsure, Joni forges through, knowing that she'll never be that wide-eyed, unafraid lover again, but this too shall pass. Only a phase, these dark cafes. I want to talk about that last chord a little bit off the script because for some reason I didn't think to write about this. It's not the dark, hopeless chord at the end of side 1, Blue. If that chord were to close this record, it would be speaking in a totally different musical language. It would end the story with a finality. The chord at the end of Richard, it's pained, but it's a little lighter. And it may look dim right now, but there is a light. Chuck Mitchell was the older, well-read folkie. He graduated with a degree in literature, and his young wife barely graduated high school. Given this, he did not like being called Mr. Joni Mitchell. Neither did Cross, Leonard Cohen, or Graham Nash. Quote, "I had never been so much in love. I had never been so unsure of myself. I had never been so fragile." Can you imagine how a male performer in the 1960s, with values a lot closer to the 1950s than I think the general cultural consciousness remembers, can you imagine how they'd feel being overshadowed by a genius like Joni Mitchell? Lindsay Zolad said, "Perhaps the most annoying aspect of genius is that it almost always involves the person identifying himself as such, for good and, at times, for ill. Joni Mitchell believes she is a genius. When she first discovered Picasso as a teen, she felt she'd communed with a kindred spirit. Ditto with Miles Davis. This kind of male hero worship has made Mitchell a difficult figure to some feminist critics, and Powers exercises this difficulty in her text, but inspiration is inspiration. One of Joni's art teachers once told her, "If you can paint with a brush, then you can paint with words." Joni has called herself a painter derailed by circumstance. When asked in interview what she'd like to be called, she said, "You'd have to hyphenate. A painter and a poet and a composer, but that leaves out singer. I don't know what you'd call it. It's definitely Renaissance." We see ourselves in Munch's Scream, Klimt's Kiss, The Lady of Shalott in her boat, and Ophelia about to drown, Michelangelo's Adam reaching out for his creator, the portrait of an artist, sans one ear. This isn't narcissistic. Speaking as an art historian, our ability to identify with an inanimate object of someone else's creating is one of the things that makes us human. Conversely, one of the things that makes art uniquely human is the audience's interaction with it. We breathe life into the object through imposing our own experiences on it. Joni's genius lies in the ability to truly paint with the written word. We can so easily insert ourselves in the images of the lonely traveler, the hipster with beach tar on their feet, her camera getting stolen in Spain. Anyone who has ever loved and lost can see themselves cynical and drunk in a dark cafe with their lover's face sketched on the coaster twice. Of course, living life like an open wound is not sustainable. Sadness is a cruel muse. She is a killer. She suffocates the artist's ability to create. The artist will decay or destruct. What makes a true artist is not their malaise. That's just one shade of life. It's their ability to awaken something in their viewer by revealing a piece of themselves in their work. That is what Joni continues to do with her cellophane wrapper album, Blue. In one robin's egg, sky, periwinkle, aquamarine, cornflower, teal and turquoise and cerulean, shining rock of lapis lazuli, admiral, and sapphire, midnight blue record, Joni Mitchell awakens the listener by revealing herself. She keeps the strokes broad enough as not to define her own face, so that when we look at the canvas, we may see ourselves. My personal favorites off this album are the whole thing. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is the mid-season special. Season 5 we are on now. That was Blue. We are coming up on the end of Joni's classic period. On Vinyl Monday, I've got one album left, Song to a Seagull, and I will cover that before I move on to Joni's jazz period, unless there's like a weird gap of time and the Hejira anniversary comes first. Whatever it is. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Joni Mitchell? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, a new Dolls pod every other Friday at noon, and if you so choose, you can give a little extra support to what I do by becoming a member of my Patreon. There are exclusive videos over there, uncensored cuts, director's cuts of Vinyl Monday episodes linked in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.